application from the ground up. So let's get started. Just making sure everyone has Vagrant installed, VirtualBox, Python, and then Visual Studio as well, because that's probably going to be where you're going to be writing your code when we are presenting. So just a heads up.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
Are you recording?
I'm recording. So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit more on the development lifecycle, but in a hands-on approach. We're going to go over what containers are, specifically with the Docker distribution of containers, and then implementing automated testing throughout this whole process. And obviously a lot of building. So let's go over a little bit of how containers are going to kind of work in this whole process. So I have this little image right here. And it shows kind of what Docker is actually doing underneath the hood. So as I spoke with last week when we were talking about the development lifecycle, we need a way of basically separating and isolating our applications within these environments. So you can see right here, Docker is basically running a service as a daemon underneath the hood right here, and is managing these images stored on this registry. And this registry can be stored locally or on the cloud somewhere. We're going to be using Docker Hub to store our images. And this is basically just a way to manage the actual containers once they're built after they leave the repo and onto this registry right here. So yeah, just if you have any questions, feel free to ask. If not, we'll continue. Yeah, well, what was your question?
So if I understand correctly, Docker Hub is not technically private. If you wanted to create a private, like use a private repository, what would you use? Is there like a version? Is there like a way to set up like a personal Docker Hub, like you can do with Git?
Yeah. So you could actually set up a private registry locally on your system or hosted somewhere.
Okay.
AWS actually has their own private registry that you can use as a service, and it's basically just private Docker Hub.
Okay.
But it's compatible with Docker and other distributions like Podman, since they're all starting to use that same sort of standard, at least in the registry and build layers. So yeah.
Thank you.
So there's a little bit of tonight's plan. We're going to let me get to this. Yeah, so again, we're gonna kind of do a quick review of the advantages of ISC. We're doing all of this just so we can version everything. We can allow other developers to collaborate easily across the whole process, from building and developing the application to deploying it, and making it easy to integrate on a bunch of CI platforms. In this case, we're just going to be using GitHub and GitHub Actions, and we're going to be automating this deployment as well. So yeah, one sec, I'm just gonna switch my screens and we can actually get started on the hands-on process. So we're gonna start with just writing our Vagrant file. So if you're able to, just open your VS Code window and basically go over and create a file called Vagrant file. And with Vagrant, we're basically going to automate the actual provisioning and build of a virtual machine with VirtualBox, and VirtualBox is serving as the type 2 hypervisor that's actually running the system for us. So by doing this, we don't actually have to go and open VirtualBox manually. We can pretty much just click buttons and it should be able to work seamlessly. So yeah, I'm going to jump in this example over here. So far as everyone following along, though, they'll have the proper software installed. So yeah, let's begin with the Vagrant file. So Vagrant is actually another software configuration language made by HashiCorp, and they also made Terraform, which is another tool we were talking about this week. So it's actually using Ruby, which is another programming language similar to Python, to actually describe these resources we're creating. So you always usually want to start with setting the mode of the language we're using, because there's many different languages you can actually use with Vagrant. The most popular is just Ruby. So for example, we can just mark this this file as being a Ruby file, as being Ruby as well, just for ease of use. So you start with the hashtag, just for adding a comment, and then you say mode Ruby. And this allows other people to basically hard set this node in the file, depending on their configuration. But just for ease of learning, we're going to just comment that part out for now. And then now we're going to basically instantiate the Vagrant object. So we're going to say Vagrant, and we're going to use the configure function. So dot configure. And this is basically making a call to the configure function from the Vagrant object class. And you can tell this is really similar to Python, because the indentation levels really matter in terms of organization instead of the traditional braces notation. So we're going to say configure, we're going to pass 2 as an argument, and then we're also going to say config with these 2 pipes on each side. That's the notation to basically start a configured environment. And then after that, we're going to do 2 spaces, or you can indent, and then we're going to basically say config, and then we're going to create a VM resource for this, so config.vm. We're going to define it, so .define. And just because this whole thing is a workshop, I'm just going to call my VM workshop. You could actually call this whatever you want, since it's just a string. We're also going to pass it a job to do, and we're going to name, this is basically assigning it the name of workshop. After that, we're going to do a new space, and we're going to define the actual OS type and image type. Someone was asking me earlier if they actually had to pre-configure their virtual machine with a certain OS, but this is actually when we're going to be defining that. So we're going to say workshop now. .vm. Define. And then after that, we're going to say, or actually, no, workshop VM.box. VM.box. So this is going to basically narrow down the scope of the VM resource we're creating under the workshop namespace. And it's basically saying with this box, we're going to set it equal to the value of Ubuntu, specifically the Bionic 64 release. And this is just because we're using specifically x86 virtualization. So Vagrant actually has their own sort of registry for things called Vagrant boxes, similar to Docker Hub for templates, and we're using this Ubuntu template that someone made, or that HashiCorp actually released. After that, we're going to set the host name of the virtual machine. So we're going to say VM workshop.vm.host name, and then we can say, I'm just going to call my workshop as well, just for ease of use. You can again call your host name whatever you want. So after that, I'm going to go ahead and do my networking rules for my workshop host. So I'm going to say again, workshop. So I'm actually going to save myself from typing new stuff. I'm just going to copy and paste this right here, and then paste workshop again. And over here, we're going to be setting our network rules. So workshop.vm.networking. And then we're going to say forwarded _ port. After that, we're going to pass another argument, and we're going to set the guest port to 8080. And again, these are just standard defaults. that I'm using. You could really configure this however you want, but with this configuration, it's just plain vanilla. We're not really spinning up any crazy network permissions or anything. We're really just also allowing the network bridge from the VM to be accessed from our host. So you can actually view the application running within this VM externally on your computer. So that's all we're really doing for this example. Again, we can just copy and paste this rule down here just to save typing. This time we're going to set another yes port to 5,000, and then also set the host port to 5,000. Yeah, so actually above in the first statement up here, also add the host port to 8080. Got that step, but edit that right now. And then we're also going to add another rule for 1043. And these are just for different services that you could basically assign once you spin up this VM. This VM is actually going to be spinning up a Minikube cluster. And that will basically give you access to a development environment for Kubernetes. And that's Kubernetes is basically a management software for Docker containers and other types of container runtimes. So now we're basically going to set the network type, and we're going to say that this is a private network. So I can copy and paste that line again, make sure I get indentation, next level, and this time I'm going to say private network. And these are all properties that HashiCorp is basically accessing with VirtualBox. So instead of having to click buttons, we're basically just storing these all as templates. Over here, we're just going to set the default IP to 192.168.22.10. And then make sure you also put this in quotes as well. So after that, we're basically going to say, well, I want to use VirtualBox as my hypervisor. The nice thing about Vagrant is it's not even just tied down to VirtualBox, so you can actually use VMware hypervisors in this as well. And for this example, though, since VirtualBox is open source, we're just going to use VirtualBox. So I'm going to say workshop.vm again, .provider. And then this time I'm going to pass the VirtualBox as the argument. I'm also going to assign this to a job. So I'm going to say do. And then we're going to be setting the hardware. So right here, I want to indent again. And then this is actually a while loop that we're actually going to be setting. So I'm going to say set the vb.memory equal to 496. And you can actually set this based on whatever your hardware restraints are. I have a laptop that I'm running this on, so I'm just going to set this to 2 CPUs as well. And then I'm going to end this statement up here. Underneath workshop. After that, we're going to basically set some filing rules. So what we're going to basically do is say if file dot exists question mark and then file dot expand path. And what this is basically doing is allowing us to copy our Git file, so our Git credentials to be ensured to be correct. And we're also going to be creating SSH keys to access our repo. So this is basically what's being defined. Basically, after this VM gets spun up, it will go in and configure it to these specific requirements that we're writing right here in code. So this will also save time for configuring after we spin this resource up. So this is the notation for the git config. And this is something that we're going to be creating when we're writing a project as well. within this if statement, again, do 2 spaces, and then we're gonna say workshop.vm.provision. And then we're gonna say file, find the source of that file. Again, it's just gonna be that root git config directory, so you can just copy and paste that again. We're gonna say destination. And then again, we're gonna also pass that that same path. And then we're gonna end this statement right here. So after that, we're gonna be doing the same thing, but for our SSH keys. So again, you can copy and paste this. And then this time we're gonna point it to our SSH keys. SSH ID RSA. And then just replace that tab. Now we're gonna also copy our vimrc editor file, just so we are able to also manipulate files from the vim editor in this figure box. So I'm gonna copy and paste that whole if statement again, and just to again save having to retype it. It's in there. Sorry, my indents are messed up. And then over here, we're basically going to replace this tab with the vimrc profile. So get rid of this and then put .vimrc. Yeah.
What if you don't know how to use Vim and you prefer to use Nano?
You could actually do that, but for specifically compatibility across a lot of different types of distributions, it's usually good just to use that vimrc editor since it's pretty standard. You could find out where the Nano profiler is, but I think just for each of the examples I'm using them, but we could definitely look into changing that later on after the workshop. So after that, we're going to change again the source destination to that profile. So I'm just going to copy and paste it. Sorry, I have another error. After that, I'm going to change the destination as well. And then we're going to basically create the Python environment now. So outside of this statement, you can now say workshop.vm.provision. And then you can say shell. We're going to pass the inline shell formatting for this. So I'm actually going to copy and paste this part into the chat because it's a little bit hard to format and type. So just for ease of use, I'm going to be pasting a set of commands. And what we're doing right here is basically telling Vagrant to open a shell. And we're going to be running a set of Ubuntu commands to configure our VM. So 1 second, I'm just going to send this in chat. Okay, so I just paste that right now. So what we're gonna do right here is basically drive the inline argument. So basically we're gonna pass another parameter right here called inline, but the actual values are just bash commands. I'm just gonna paste my example that I put in the chat. You can see right here, have this, the Ubuntu commands. It's basically just going to update the repository, grab the Python 3 package, upgrade your Python 3 version, and then it's going to create a virtual environment as well for us. Yeah, question? Sorry, say it again.
Could you send the commands again, please?
Yeah. So if you go in the chat, you should be able to copy and paste.
Yeah, just
So
send
they-
me some.
They're not on Zoom. So put it in Discord.
Oh, okay.
Wait, actually, is Jason doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah, can we just
Oh,
put
okay.
it in Discord?
Wait, I don't know if I can copy paste the chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna add the commands also to the Zoom workshop chat. as
Yeah.
well.
You can change permissions.
Oh. I will put it on Discord.
Yeah, so, yeah, go ahead and just copy and paste that. And that's basically gonna allow us to spin up our environment. And then I'm also gonna paste another set of commands after we get the confirmation here. Was everyone able to get that piece of code?
Did you put in the workshops?
Yes.
Put it under workshops, the workshops.
I can put it general.
Yeah, I put it under the workshop.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so now I'm going to basically set up the Docker environment now. And this is gonna basically install Docker on a virtual machine for us as well. So let me paste that in the chat too. And then I'll go over it as well. Okay, so basically what we're gonna do now is add that chunk of code, and again, these are just the installation commands to basically help us install Docker and that whole containerized environment with Kubernetes. So I'm going to copy and paste that. And again, these are just instantiations of the workshop resource we're creating, except we're going to be specifying to install Docker as well. So I need to make sure that I indent it properly. Yeah, so make sure as well in your file that the indentation levels are all consistent with each other. I know when you copy and paste, it can get messed up. Make sure that it's matching with that line over here. And then once you have that copied and pasted, what we can do is actually run a, create the other resource file. So 1 second after I fix this. Yeah, so just making sure everyone was able to follow along right now. We're right now. I think part of that here, let me send the second tenant. So actually omit the section in the workshop chat that says create a Kubernetes cluster. I just resend the proper part. So just don't copy and paste that section and paste the new one I added. And I'll send that in the group in the Zoom chat as well. Okay, so is everybody able to add that section of code? Okay, yeah, so now after you have that complete file written, I'll send you the actual example of what it's supposed to look like. And we can now run the file. All right, we can run the file after we generate the configuration. So one second, I'm going to send this link in the workshop chat. And you can basically compare your code to that example. So this is basically the complete file right here. Yeah. Oh, question? Okay, one minute. I'm gonna answer the question. Yeah, what was someone have a question?
No, I was asking whether or not that second end was ending the config section, but that showed it.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, we have these two end statements right here. It may have gotten cut off in the chat, but make sure you add that end statement that's on the outer scope that is matching the top layer of this Vagrant class right here. Make sure you have that two end statement. So after that, we need to basically create the actual setup config file. So go ahead and also create a file and copy and paste it with these settings. After that, also create a requirements.txt file, and then you can basically also copy and paste those requirements into that file. So after that, you can actually go into your terminal and you can open Vagrant. So if you have PowerShell, open PowerShell. If you have Linux, you just open your normal bash. Now, this computer I'm presenting on doesn't have PowerShell on it, or does not PowerShell, Vagrant. However, I will still be able to provide the commands. Is it able to see my my screen, my terminal screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So what we want to do is type Vagrant up. So type that after you created those respective files, and then tell me what happens. You should be able to see the actual VM start to spin up.
It says a Vagrant environment or target machine is required to run this. Oh, I have to change directories.
Yeah, so make sure you're also in the actual make sure you actually go in the Active Directory of the files you generate. So I would recommend opening VS Code and using that terminal they have. Here, let me switch my laptop. Let me share my screen on the other side.
Participation.
So has anyone had an issue running their Vagrant file
Yeah.
in the Zoom call?
Oh, it's not networking.
Okay, there's no problem with splitting the resource. We'll go into actually creating the application that we're going to be running inside this game. So what we want to do right now is create a new file in VS Code. So go ahead and make a new file. I'm just going to be creating just up here just so I can share it with the audience. And then what we want to call this file is we're basically going to be creating a Flask lightweight application right now. Just a really simple hello world type one. So right now we're going to start off with app.py UI, and this is going to show this Python file. And we're basically going to use Flask, which is a really lightweight web framework to make a really simple hello world type web server. So you can basically use this to develop web apps, front ends, and a lot of different sorts of apps with just Python packages. I'm using it just because it's lightweight and it's pretty common package used for Python development. So I figured it would be good to kind of get into this. So we create our Python file called app.py. And we're going to import Flask, which is our package we're using. And then we're going to say app equals Flask, which is the Flask class that we're importing in that first statement. And then we're going to pass on 2 underscores on both sides, name. And then after that, we're going to find a route for the actual HTTP request. So we're going to say app.route. We're going to pass this slash as the argument. Oh, yes, question.
Is this compatible with virtual environments?
With VirtualBox?
No, with Python.
Yeah.
Okay, because I don't want to install Flask.
Question,
Yeah.
we're using Vagrant today. Is there any advantages or disadvantages to using Vagrant over Terraform for VirtualBox, for example?
Yeah, so Vagrant specifically for the development environments, and it gives developers a common bridge the gap between what's being hosted and what they're being used with Terraform, but with spinning up their own environments and replicating that. So it really is for if you're running it on your individual computer, or if you're basically bridging a bunch of different computers onto a common like Git server somewhere, but you want your actual VM configuration to be the same. Also with just being able to actually configure the boxes after you actually define like the hypervisor and those resource limits is pretty what's the word for it, like handy. There's also Packer, which is used for templating actual like ISO images, and they actually use that a lot in conjunction with Terraform to like provision production ready VMs.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that after that, we're just going to return some text saying hello Flask. And just to clarify, everyone was able to run their Vagrant file properly.
It's holding me up at SSH augmented private key.
Okay, so the private key should be getting generated automatically. It might just take if your Vagrant box is still booting and it's saying SSH private key. It's probably just taking a while to provision. But if you actually are able to allow that to finish, then we should be able to test later on to see if we can actually get into the Vagrant box in CLI. So we'll be doing that after everyone's able to show that they can, or that their Vagrant box built correctly. If not, we can help them out.
And how would you adapt this to use your own key pair?
So it's actually generating it should be generating the SSH key pair.
Right,
For
I
us.
want to use like one that I use for all my dev.
Yeah, so you can actually point that SSH key profile in the code. So you know how.
Oh, okay.
You know how I pointed to the bash RC profile of SSH? So you can actually put that where you can put that path wherever you want. So now after we created this basic Python app, what we can do is also from here create some tests for it. So after we created that file, we're going to create another one, and then we're going to call this routes.py. And then within this file, we're going to say from service import app, which is that other app file we created earlier. They're all commonly using this to structure the actual application. So this routes file is going to allow us to basically say if you hit the counter route that we're going to specify, we're going to return a value that's going to increment by 1. So this is just a basic way to ensure that these requests are working within the actual server. So we're going to say at this app route, we're going to app.route. We're going to pass again this general path / and then we're going to say we're going to define a function now. So we're going to say def index, and then after that we're going to say return hello Flask. So basically, if once we have this all typed out, we'll be able to go to localhost, and on the screen we should be able to say we should be able to see hello Flask on the screen, and then I'll show another route that we're going to define as well. So now we're going to define another route called counter. So app.route counter. We're going to define a variable with global and then counter, and then we're going to increment it by 1. So plus equals 1. We're going to return counter to a dictionary. And then counter. And then now we're basically just going to add another function for testing. And we're going to call this. Oh wait, my bad. I forgot to define the function right here too. So at app.route counter, we also want to define a function called getCounter. Make sure you also do that as well. So right here, we're going to make a function. We're just going to call reset counter. This will help us reset to 0 if we're testing it. Maybe. Let's call it global counter. And we're going to set a condition for it. So if we say app.testing.
So we can't see your screen right now.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, I wasn't sharing my screen properly, right? Let me show the other one. So I created a file called app.py. And this was the actual code for it. So we're basically just creating this basic app.py. That's going to act as main for our actual application. And then let me also show you the routes file I just showed right now. So this is the routes file right here. And this is for us to basically specify where the HTTP requests are going to be actually returned. And we're implementing a reset counter function so we can actually implement automated testing during the build. And this will help reset the counter from 0 after it's iterated. So from here now, we're actually going to just create our init.py file. And I'll show you how to create that right now too. So what you want to do is add 2 underscores, then call it init, and then another 2 underscores, call it .py. Yeah, what's the question?
Under rats.py, it's telling me that service doesn't exist. But when you're importing an app, it's telling me that service, that the import cannot be resolved.
Oh, okay, so yeah, that's actually a dependency, but we're gonna be running with the Docker file, so you don't have to worry about it right now.
Okay.
Okay, so with this init.py file, this is just gonna allow us to also integrate that. I'm gonna say from Flask import Flask app equals Flask underscore name. And then we're also going to import routes versus import routes. I'll also send this in the chat as well. So from here, we're actually going to start creating the Docker file and then also creating the service, because this Flask application is going to be run as a systemd service. So this will allow us to actually create this and implement it in the Docker file. So I'm going to create a new file right now. And then within this file, I'm just going to call it service. Or I'm not going to call it service. I'm going to call it also in .py. So I can actually copy and paste this file right here. And then I'm going to create a folder called service, and then put it in the put the Python file called init.py in here. And you can again copy and paste that same init.py file that we had earlier in here. So after you do that, we can go ahead and create the Docker file. So right now, we'll go ahead and create a new file. We go ahead and call that Docker file. So this is going to be how we actually run and build our container. We're going to be basically defining the version and the image of the container we're using. And we know this is a Python application, so we can say Python from Python 3.8. And this colon basically is a way of tagging images with your version. So the base image is called Python, and then that little colon here separates the version, which is 3.8 Slim. So we're just going to be installing 3.8, the light version. Now we're going to say worker, and then app, and we're going to basically copy requirements.text. And that's the text file that I told everyone to create earlier. So this is going to actually package with dependencies. And this period right here specifies the relative path of the container. So it's saying basically copy requirements to this current path. After that, we're going to say run pip install -r requirements.txt. And this is going to install Flask and a bunch of different Python packages like service into the Docker container, so we can just build an image and run it without having to install it on our host. This is all contained within this container that we're building. Python 3.8 with these packages defining requirements will only be available within that container and not in the entire virtual machine. So now we're going to copy service and then copy service. And we're going to basically create an executable from that called service. Within your service folder, also create a new file called routes.py and copy and paste the other routes file we created into that folder. Just to clarify again, I have that folder named service, and we're basically going to be using that within our container running. So now I'm going to expose the port to port 5000. And then I'm going to type cmd, and this is basically going to be the starting command of the container once we run it. After you create that Docker file, yes.
What's the difference between running run and Docker file?
Yeah, so to clarify, run is actually running this command during the build process, whereas cmd will run this command after it's finished building. So it's a starting point. Yeah, so after that, just try building the container locally by opening your terminal and then typing docker build -t workshop latest and then period for that current relative path, and then just type enter. Again, I don't have Docker on this machine I'm presenting on, which is unfortunate, but if you're able to build it, let me know. If you're not, and we can resolve that. Yeah, so if we go back to the actual file structure, we can, let me zoom out. Someone was asking how we want to structure these files. So if you go back, you should have a relative path in your base folder called, let me open File Explorer. So everyone should have that current path they're in. I'm just going to call my workshop. And within this workshop folder, you want to make sure that you have your Vagrant file present, your configuration file, your requirements, and you also have a folder called services. And within services, you have those Python files that are outside of that folder, also copied. So the init file and then the routes file. Let me draw a diagram of it actually. So, yeah, right now we're gonna do a pizza break and then I'll just be troubleshooting with everyone. So feel free to eat the free pizza. And in this workshop as well, we're just gonna be doing the intermission. I'll just be going over the issues that, the audience is having right now. So I'm just going over the file structure again. Feel free to take a break, or just ask any questions. So again, the file structure is gonna look like this. You have, Vagrant file. And these are all in the same directory. And then you have your config, your settings up, config, setup.config. And then you also have your requirements.txt. And then after that, you also have another folder. And that folder is called services. Or service, not services. And in services, you have init.py. You also have routes.py. And outside of services, remember, we just added the Docker file. So you have that Docker file. And then you also have the app.py file. And then you also have another init.py. And you also have routes.py. Does that file structure make sense? Yeah.
So why do we have two init.py and two route.py?
So we're creating a service, and those are gonna be part of our automated tests when we build it. Yeah, because we're gonna be running that as executable.
But why do they also need to be directory now?
Because basically in the Docker file, we're basically saying these contents that are in the same file hierarchy are the actual app contents, and the same within the directory to run a direct copy of this, but only running the tests to ensure that it's properly working. So we're consolidating two things within the build stage, and from here I'll show people how to connect this to their GitHub account to push the Docker down. But yeah, right now is a pizza break if you guys want free pizza. Okay, so we'll get back started in a few minutes. I'm just gonna go over a few review concepts. So again, what we're doing right here is developing the most basic class gap. And we're basically gonna be testing it when we build the Docker image on GitHub Actions, which I'm gonna show pretty soon. And, this is basically just gonna allow us to automate the build and testing of everything. And you'll be able to run and host this application from within your, favorite virtual machine that's being spun up. So, yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and make a repo. I think if you're following along, go ahead on GitHub on your account and, create a repository. If you don't have a GitHub account, you can just you can make one really quickly with your Gmail accounts. And if not, I definitely will have code examples to follow along. So yeah, I'm just gonna create a new repo. And then in the repo, I'm just gonna call it workshop. You can call it whatever you want.
You can try DRing.
So within the workshop repo, you can see these commands. So I would go to my command line and pretty much copy and paste. And I would go to my code base, so basically where all my code is stored on VS Code. If you have VS Code open, you can actually just use your current editor. And you can initialize your repo by running these commands. Obviously, make sure this URL is corresponding to your repository that you spun up. But this will just allow us to push what we have currently to GitHub, assuming your code is working and so forth. So I'll just leave it here while everyone's still getting pizza, and then we can finish it up and get this deployed at your inbox.
We need to get out of this.
Yeah.
Oh.
So also go ahead and make a Docker Hub account. So go on Docker Hub, and this is going to be what we're going to use to actually hold all the codes. So yes, go ahead and sign up for that. And we're going to be using this alongside GitHub Actions to build and push everything.
What should we be exploring in the gig one?
In the gig ignore, you should just add a Python. They should be able to give you a template. So if you're having a question about what to add to the gig ignore, just keep it default. And if it asks you for a specific type, just select Python 3. If not, you don't need to actually add that gig ignore, but if you want to just for best practice reasons, select the Python version. Okay, so add these files as well. So if you don't have the GitHub CLIs installed, again, we can just go and upload is the existing files. So you can just do this and drag and drop your respective files that you wanted to add. I'll follow along and do that with everyone else who doesn't have the CLI set up. So we're going to be just adding our Docker files, which should be so. Again, add your code. I'm going to add mine really quickly right now, and then we're going to create the GitHub action in our repository.
Dude, that's exactly what the one I see. Because you have. That's a Swift engine, bro.
Wait, we need to create a Docker repository as well.
Yeah.
Is he really that bad? Like,
Yeah,
really?
he's like genuinely that mean.
Oh, Bessie Chris.
Yeah.
No, but like,
He's worked here for 20 years.
I don't know how he's job.
No one does.
I don't understand is like how he actually talks to like professionals in that same demeanor.
So let's go ahead and create our GitHub action. So first things first, assuming you created your Docker Hub account, go ahead and what's that? Let me log in.
What's his name?
Oh. Who's the
I walked away from my computer.
something? Jimmy. I think he's your coach, right?
Oh.
I think Harvard, right? Curtis? Yeah, Curtis.
No, it's Curtis and then there's someone else. But Curtis and someone else are in the placement.
We're going to go ahead and create a repository on your Docker Hub account. So this is going to store our image after it's built from GitHub Actions.
Yeah.
And
Install like that's the.
I'll show you how to do that right now.
Okay, I thought that came with like extra stuff. It technically does. We install it. So I'll add that to hand. What I normally do is I uninstall whatever's running. Doesn't the checklist? Because that's the reason I never even knew about this. Okay. Okay, well.
Yes.
Magical times. Yeah.
Dude, no, he was brattier than a girl in puberty, I swear to God.
That's where Anna
Okay, like I don't know who we should, because someone has to build a relationship with it. Because it's not actually what I just don't know.
I'm probably gonna have to do it. More than likely him.
Honestly, how about we make a list of everyone we need to we'll roll dice for who gets to pick first.
These are fair moves. You're smart. You're smart.
Well, because I don't want it to be like I'm just choosing not to do it, because I'll take one of them. Yeah, because like otherwise it would be unfair and me just abusing my power to get out of doing it.
Okay, so let's go ahead and create this repository. So in repositories, just click create repository. I'm going to call mine workshop. And just go ahead and make it public. So from here, after you have it created, remember that the assignment to name and this would be important for the part of the show right now. So we're going to go ahead and create a GitHub action. And GitHub Actions is a way of us automating certain tasks from the repo. So we can actually build this once you push the code to GitHub. It'll actually run the Docker build from this GitHub Actions service, and it'll push it up to Docker Hub for us. So I'll show the code example right now. So again, go to your GitHub repo and go to actions. So go to your repo, click actions. Just basically create a new workflow. So click sub workflow yourself. It'll open you to this code editor right here. And this code editor is where we're actually going to just add the GitHub Actions file. It's using YAML as the language, and this will also help us kind of keep things organized while describing each resource as plain English. So let me send this example in the chat as well, and the audience can copy and paste and change certain values. So right here in this code, you can see that it's starting off with the name Docker UCI. This is just supposed to describe what's being run.
Can you move the mic away?
Oh, yeah, sorry. And we're basically saying on push on the branch called main in this repo to run this job. And the job is called push to registry. So let me send this example in the chat right now, and everybody will be able to follow along. Okay. So after you go and copy and paste this piece of code, go to open a new tab and click on settings on your GitHub repo. So go to your repo, click settings, and we're gonna add your password and username for your Docker Hub account. You can see right here in the GitHub Actions, I'm saying, log into Docker Hub, build and push this action with secrets Docker Hub username and Docker password. So we're gonna create variables called GitHub secrets that this workflow will be able to access from the repo. And this will allow us to push and build to GitHub automatically. So I'm gonna go into settings and then click secrets, actions. We're gonna create a new repository secret. So over here, just add your Docker username. And then call capital Docker underscore username. So let me send this variable name in the chat too. And we're also going to name one called Docker underscore password.
Can you put that in the
Yeah. Okay, so.
Oh, I meant the whole thing.
Oh, yes.
It's kind of hard to type that all up.
Yeah, so 1 second, I'm just gonna go and add the Docker underscore password now as my repository secret. Docker password. I don't want to show my password for everyone, so I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen real quick. But go ahead and add your Docker Hub password to this GitHub secret. Okay, so I just added my repository secret for my password. After you've done that, go back to your file on GitHub Actions under your repo, and you can see that the tags field is blank. So that's because we have to still specify our Docker Hub repository. So go ahead and go back to Docker Hub and copy and paste the name of your username, and then also the project repository. So mine's called Fruitbox 12 / workshop. So I'm just gonna copy and paste that right here, in the tags block. And this is basically saying just a push to that repository. And I'm gonna specify a colon name, and you can call this tag whatever you want. This is just so you can reference what version of the container you built. And I'm just gonna call mine latest, just for ease of use. So now I should be able to just start committing it. And assuming you have your actual content in the repository, you should be able to build the application. And within this build, we'll know if the app failed or not because of the test it passes when it runs the service. So this is another, again, way of us automating and preventing the need for human interaction during this whole deployment. So from here, you can actually watch the GitHub action run on the workflow. We can see that mine just failed, so let's figure out what caused my failure. So it's actually saying I'm missing my service file. So if you were paying attention, you would actually tell I didn't add that file in there, even though the Docker file specified it. So again, I'm going to add this folder with the required files I explained in this file structure right here. So I'm just going to add them right now really quick. So let's check back on this build that I just committed to. So far, has everyone been able to follow along? You can see the actual repo building everything for us. So it's saying there's another error, and it's failed to calculate the checksum requirements.txt. So again, I was also missing the requirements.txt file. 1 second, yeah, it is. Everyone else, I just want to make sure they're able to commit their files and run the workflow. We good on that? Okay. Now this should be able to build and push to Docker Hub. And from here, this completes pretty much the build and test and deployment part. And you should be able to actually run this via VirtualBox machine. So after this build and pushes successfully, go ahead and access your Vagrant box with the command that I'm going to paste in the chat right now. Yep, so we can see my build just finished, completed. If we go on Docker Hub and we look at my repo, the image just got built right here, and we can tell it ran the tests based off of the workflow logs. So we can, I was actually watching it run the service, and that service was ensuring that we were actually what's it called, testing for those edge cases defined. So again, go to your Vagrant terminal and let me clear this. So go to your Vagrant terminal, and then after that, you should be able to just access your Vagrant box. So when you guys booted it, was it able to actually complete the full creation of your virtual machine? Were you guys able to get past that part, or was there problems? We're good on that? Okay, so from here, you should be able to access your Vagrant box. So if you do Vagrant SSH, you should be able to access that that VM. So let me give you the command again. Vagrant SSH. Then I'll type it in the chat as well. And that's part of the SSH keys that we were actually accessing in the Vagrant file. This is how we're actually establishing the connection. Let me know if you have problems connecting to your virtual machine. So after your Vagrant machine has booted, you should be able to run this command now. Docker, because Docker is now automatically installed in your VM based off of actual code we added. Let me show you. Yeah. If we look back in the Vagrant file, remember that section that I added to the chat where it's provisioning Docker. So again, type Docker login, and after you enter your Vagrant box VM, and then that should ask you to basically input your Docker Hub credentials. That's basically so you can pull the image into the Vagrant VM and run it locally. So after you log in, you should be able to do Docker pull, and then in my case, my image is called Fruitbox 12 / workshop. Back with latest. So you should be able to pull this image down to your local repository. If you want to, just try running this one on your Vagrant box. And then after you do that, type Docker run -it -t-d, and we're going to define the port. So I'm just going to say 5000 : 5000. That's the port range we're specifying. And then the name of the container, workshop, and then the container itself, so for box 12, workshop, latest. So I'll paste these commands in the chat as well, so you can try it out. If you didn't actually build your own container, so use this one as a reference. If you didn't do that, run these commands. And if you are using your own container, obviously change the repository name to your own name. After that, you should be able to access the VM. So type if config on your virtual on your Vagrant box virtual machine, and then it should give you a drop down of your network configuration. So you're going to want to get that host IP. This is the version of Windows, but on Linux for ifconfig, it should give you your subnet mask, your gateway, your logical interface. So when it gives you your host IP address, just take that IP and then go to your browser and then paste that and then go to port 5000. And you should be able to access the app. Again, I'm not running it locally because this machine wasn't configured properly, or this machine doesn't have the proper configuration. But I am running it alongside my laptop. I just can't connect it to the screen right now. But you should be able to access the app from here after you run it. So let me know if you have questions in the audience and we can troubleshoot. But that's pretty much concluding the workshop. Thanks for following along, and we'll definitely kind of build off of this in future workshops too. So stay tuned if you definitely want more hands-on coding experience. Thank you. Yeah. So anyone having problems so far, or all good?